Good evening, everybody. My name is Christy Ferrantella, and I'm the president of the Nantucket Chamber of Commerce. I'm here tonight with breaking news. Governor Baker released updates for the hospitality industry today. So to give you a little bit of a recap, today there was information released on restaurants and lodging and what the guidelines and checklists will be to reopen. In addition, on Monday, the governor will be announcing a new executive order to allow employees to return to brick and mortar businesses to start preparing for opening and releasing guidelines for retail. On Monday, that will not allow retail to open up for business, but will allow them to go in to start preparing. This also applies to lodging and restaurants to start preparing. To give a little bit of an update, lodging is set out that it needs to be 6 feet, maintain social distancing. You want to redo your layout so when people are coming or going, there's not as many entry points or exit points where people can bottleneck. You should try to have check-in be as contactless as possible. Payment methods should be electronic if possible. Inside the rooms, that you should not leave any pens, papers, magazines, guides, anything like that. And you should aim to have 24 hours in between rooms if possible, or update to the best cleaning products and protocols. They also urge you to look into new central air and making sure that you have windows open and doors open as much as possible. When lodging reopens, if somebody does fall ill inside of your establishment, that room will not be able to be used until it has gone through the enhanced room sanitation and abides by all CDC recommendations. It's also under the governor's mandate. They are urging everybody that comes from out of state to self-quarantine for 14 days upon arrival into the state of Massachusetts. In terms of restaurants, they have the same 6 feet social distancing, and the guidelines first start looking at indoor dining. That's going to maintain the 6 feet in between tables, and there'll be no option to be using bars. So bar areas could be removed and turned into tables if it goes with fire code. But other than that, you have to maintain your current location with 6 feet in between tables. Restaurants also need to adapt where menus need to be either single-use paper on a chalkboard on a wall or electronically on your website where customers could look on their phones for your menu. Anything like utensils will not be on the table. Those will be brought out when your food arrives, and they'll not be kind of central salt shakers or salt and pepper shakers unless they're cleaned in between. And of course, everything would be request only, ketchup, mustard, all of that. When we move into outdoor dining, that's going to be phase 2, and that's what's opening first. You'll still maintain that 6 feet social distancing, and the governor and the lieutenant governor are working with local municipalities to expedite the permitting process to open up outdoor dining, the ABCC to help loosen the restrictions on liquor on outdoor dining, and also working with local municipalities to look at some of the layout plans of closing down streets. So restaurants will have outdoor dining on phase 2, which right now is scheduled for June 8th. The governor did say on June 6th, he will be holding a press conference to notify us if we are ready to move into phase 2. And indoor dining will begin shortly after that at some point in phase 2 when the health data shows that we're trending in the right direction and we are ready to open up restaurants for indoor dining. Restaurants also have a restriction that there's no more than 6 people to a table or reservation. And all sectors are required to follow the 6 feet social distancing, to have masks worn by the employees and the customers, and to remind everybody to continue to wash their hands.
Good evening. I am Roberto Santamaria, your host this evening for Nantucket Pulse programming made possible by Nantucket Cottage Hospital's Community Health Initiative. This is a special edition of the Nantucket Pulse program that will air weekly, covering the coronavirus impacts for the island and will provide urgent updates as they unfold. Today's episode is being filmed at 9 a.m. on Friday, May 29th. Before we begin, I want to remind our viewers that the town election is Tuesday, June 16th, and the annual town meeting is Thursday, June 25th. It has been 10 days since the hospitals last detected a new confirmed case of COVID-19 on island. This evening's episode welcomes back Nantucket Cottage Hospital Public Information Officer Jason Graziadei to share a new statement from the hospital. I will also interview moderator of Nantucket's annual town meeting, Sarah Alger, and town manager Libby Gibson about the plans for annual town meeting and COVID-19 developments. Let's take a brief rundown of this week's community updates. At next week's Board of Health meeting on June 4th, we will officially rescind all Nantucket orders except number 4. This order extends shellfish licenses until the town of Nantucket decides the pandemic is contained enough to start issuing new licenses. The Board of Health will issue Emergency Order Number 10, which codifies the Nantucket-specific restrictions that I mentioned here last week. Any combination of construction and landscape workers on site cannot exceed 6 plus 1 COVID officer. If more workers are needed, they may apply to the building commissioner or natural resources director for a waiver to use a crew of no more than 10. All workers should abide by Massachusetts safety standards for construction and the Nantucket guidelines and rules for getting back to work. Links to these documents are in the description of this video. Order number 10 allows curbside pickup and delivery of food from restaurants, but prohibits customers from entering the inside of the restaurant itself. At this week's Select Board meeting, Nantucket Cottage Hospital President and CEO Gary Shaw underlined the importance of slowing the spread of the disease by following the easy steps of maintaining a social distance of 6 feet, wearing a face covering when you cannot maintain that distance, staying mindful of COVID-19 symptoms, and washing your hands regularly. He said, quote, "There's a tremendous amount of personal responsibility here. Some people say there's nothing to worry about. There is something to worry about." End quote. The Commonwealth requires face coverings in public spaces in which one cannot remain socially distant. The police will not enforce this policy, only the Board of Health. Repeat offenders may have to pay a fine of up to $300. The Commonwealth continues to keep closed child care services that go beyond an employee caring for one family's children at their house. Nannies and babysitters are allowed. Phase 2, which could start on June 8th at the earliest, will likely open childcare to the public. Summer camps will likely open in that phase as well. The Nantucket Community School has canceled all its sports programs regardless. They plan to continue with their other summer camp programs if Phase 2 allows them. For essential service workers, Nantucket now has 4 daycare providers designated as exempt emergency childcare programs on Nantucket. To learn more, please visit the link in the description. The Nantucket Community Foundation's Fund for Emergency Food Relief is building on the success of the Senior Meal Delivery Program that began on March 23rd. It is providing funding to pair island restaurants with different Nantucket nonprofits to provide free, healthy meals to those who need them. To contribute to this generous program, please visit the link in the description. The pandemic has increased food insecurity on the island. Nearly 400 people have come to the Nantucket Food Pantry looking for help on a single day. That is almost a 4-fold increase for their normal traffic. In order to keep up with the demand, they have asked for help from Boston Food Assistant Programs and have recruited more volunteers. Meals on Wheels continues to provide meals to seniors in need 5 nights a week. Finally, I want to talk about the protocol if someone, whether an employee or visitor, tests positive for the virus and spends more than 15 minutes in a town building. In that case, my department would have everyone leave the building, have the place deep cleaned and sanitized, and then in a day or so, have everyone come back. Lastly, I want to talk about the models that was discussed at the Select Board meeting. The most recent epidemiologic model by Dr. Randall Sell of Drexel University was developed for the town of Provincetown. We are adapting that model for our use here on Nantucket. What it does, it uses a 3-day or 7-day or multi-day or multi-week look back on how many cases we've had, what the incubation period of the virus is, so that we can model to see how bad or how good our outbreak is getting. Right now, Nantucket has still a very low rate of infection, so we are doing very well. but we will use this model that Dr. Sell created to help inform our policy decision making. If the outbreak gets worse, we can take action to mitigate that issue. If the outbreak gets better, hopefully things will start getting better for all of our decision makings and we can lift a lot of restrictions, but we can't lift any restrictions more than what the governor has already set. One question that was also brought up at the select board meeting are all the different metrics that we're using. We are using the case fatality rate and the positive testing rate, all from data used in Massachusetts and local on Nantucket. The 10% data testing rate means that of all those people being tested showing COVID-19 symptoms, we want that number of positives being less than 10%. What that means is that the burden of illness on the island is actually caused by other respiratory illnesses and not COVID-19, which is a good thing. And then as far as the case fatality rate is in Massachusetts, we have a case fatality rate for COVID-19 of 5.6%, which means that 5.6% of all those who get COVID-19 are dying. However, that 5% is clustering among the elderly population. So what we want is that our case fatality rate in Nantucket is lower than that 5%. We want that to be 0. But we know that in some cases that might not be possible. We have already had one death on the island. But Nantucket, keep doing what you're doing. We're doing very well, and we will be moving back to the governor's orders really soon. And lastly, I want to talk about the 2 studies, research studies that are being discussed here for serology and PCR testing. The serology testing is moving forward as planned. The PCR active surveillance testing has been a little delayed due to the increased funding vote that was taken at the select board meeting. The finance committee meeting now has to meet on Thursday to confirm that funding. In the meantime, for any employers who are looking to fund the testing for their own employees, please contact the health department or Nantucket Cottage Hospital to set up testing and a self-pay portion. That can be done immediately, and we will start testing next week. And now we have Libby Gibson, our town manager, and Sarah Alger, our town moderator, for our Zoom interview. How are you guys today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Hi, Roberto. Thanks so much for having me today.
How will this year's town meeting be different?
It would almost be easier to say how it won't be different, but here's how it will be different. We're going to make sure that everyone feels as safe as possible coming to the meeting. This will mean some things that people probably won't love, like assigned seating, 6-foot separation between all voters. I'm assuming longer check-in lines with appropriate social distancing as people check in, a reduced number of articles, a really pared down meeting. Our attempt is going to make this meeting as quick as possible so that we spend as little time together. I can't believe I'm saying this, as little time together as possible. I've spent the last 23 or 24 years encouraging people to come to town meeting and to participate. This time, for the first time, I'm going to encourage people who feel comfortable staying home to do that, where our goal is going to be to have just the minimum number of articles discussed that are necessary to allow town operations to go forward smoothly over the next year.
Will this pared down town meeting be sufficient for the island's upcoming budget?
As the moderator mentioned, working to pare down the articles to only the most essential that we need for town operations going into the next fiscal year. So if we are able to have town meeting before June 30th as planned, we should hopefully, if everybody votes it, get our budgets in place, because there are differing budgets between general fund and enterprise fund, and that should be sufficient. There would be some issues if we don't get this voted, and that will take a lot of additional work and figuring out how to proceed. There's sort of a last resort the towns can use if they don't have a town meeting to approve a budget before June 30th. It's called the 1/12 budget. In fact, I just got off a webinar about it, and it is not ideal to put it mildly, to do the 1/12 budget. It is a measure, again, last resort measure, but we hope that we will be able to proceed with the town meeting on Thursday, June 25th, starting at 5 p.m. at the high school, and get this pared down warrant done in maybe record time.
Sarah, Libby, what would you say to voters who want their voices heard at annual town meeting but are afraid to come in person?
I would say that we are working very hard, as I said earlier, to pare down the warrant to only the most essential articles, to remove any articles that are not essential. So the thinking is, of the 117 articles that are on the warrant, we're hoping to pare that down to about 30, 31-ish. And all the rest of them, citizens included, would automatically go to the next town meeting. We don't know exactly when that will be, but that would be the thinking. We also are planning 2 pre-town meeting forums on Zoom webinar. The first one is June 9th, Tuesday, June 9th at 5 o'clock. The second is Thursday, June 18th at 5 o'clock. And that will be where we will introduce the plan, review the plan for the pared downtown meeting and the safety measures, and then take questions. And again, people should hopefully feel comfortable staying home because we are working to remove any controversial articles from the warrant, or not vote them, continue them to the next town meeting.
And lastly, for both of you, at annual town meeting, what safety measures will be in place to keep participants safe?
The town clerk is working very hard in conjunction with the health department, as you know, Roberto, and the schools, Diane O'Neill at the schools, to make sure that voters are as safe as possible. We're going to have hand sanitizing stations, cleaning protocols. The building will be sanitized before and after the meeting. Voters will be put in assigned seating. They'll be 6 feet apart. We're going to make sure that we have as much ventilation as possible, and we're going to try to make the meeting as short as we possibly can so that the amount of time that we're all together in one room is limited. We're going to limit the number of people in the auditorium to the amount necessary to maintain 6 feet social distancing at all times, and then use other places in the building, such as the gym, for any overflow, if there is any.
Now, Sarah, could you please summarize how annual town meeting will work from the first event until the last moment?
The first event would be coming to or participating in or watching the 2 forums that the town is going to put on. I think those will be very important for the voters to understand the articles, to see what the pared down warrant will look like, to understand what articles are critical to town operations and which aren't. Unlike prior years, I'm going to allow people to call articles. Now, when I say call articles, that means let me know if there's an article that they're concerned about where they don't agree with the recommendation of either the planning board or the finance committee, and they feel it's an article that needs to be discussed. Any article that is called will not be on the consent agenda. And when we have all of the articles called, and I will not only take emails and telephone calls up until the meeting, I'll do one final call of the articles at the beginning of town meeting. Once we understand what all the called articles are, they'll go into 2 baskets. One basket is the articles that are critical to town operation. Those articles will have to be discussed and voted on. And the other basket is articles that are not critical to town operation. Those articles will be made part of a motion to pass over. And the selectmen have committed to putting those articles on whatever the next warrant is for the next town meeting, whether it's a special or an annual, so that, for example, citizens who had articles that they had put forward for this annual town meeting will not have to go back out and get additional signatures. The uncalled articles, they form our consent agenda. So there any article that no one feels is necessary to discuss. I mean, a lot of times articles 1 and 2 and 3 are things that are on the consent agenda. Those are things like the acceptance of reports from previous meetings, et cetera. Those articles we will vote on as a block, and they will be adopted and taken out of the way. I'm hoping that there'll be a large chunk of those so that we don't have a clog up at our next town meeting, whenever that is. But if we have a lot that require discussion, then we will pass over them and put them on a future warrant. Once we have voted on the consent agenda, then we'll go forward and discuss the articles that are critical to town operation that have been called for discussion, and hopefully dispose of them one way or the other in fairly short order, and adjourn the meeting so we can all get out of there and go home. I do want to mention that people will be asked to wear masks at town meeting. If you do not have a mask, there are a lot of people around town. I've been saying this pandemic has brought out the worst in a lot of people, and you tend to hear about that the most for some reason, which is too bad, because it's also brought out the best in a lot of people. And there are a number of people around town who are making masks, hanging them out in front of their houses or their businesses for people to take without any charge at all. So if you don't have a mask, go online, figure out where those free masks are, and get one so that you can come to town meeting and wear it and be safe.
And this year, annual town meeting features a new electronic voting system. How will that work, Sarah?
Yes, I think it's going to be interesting. A lot of people might say, why are you doing electronic voting for this meeting? Isn't that going overboard? But in fact, if we have to have multiple rooms, I think the electronic voting is going to be critical to having the meeting run smoothly. The way it works is when you come to the meeting and you check in, you're given like a little handheld, almost like a remote control clicker, like for your TV, with a 1 and a 2 button. 1 is yes and 2 is no. Every voter gets one. The number of the voter device is connected to that voter. So at the end of the meeting, if you mistakenly put it in your bag and go home with it, they can track you down and get it back. And what will happen is every voter will have a handheld device. When we announce the vote, we'll say the voting is now open. There'll be a period of 30 seconds where people can register their votes. Voting will then be closed, and the result will be shown. Now, if we're 10 people in the auditorium, it's going to feel very silly to be doing that. But if we're more than, say, the 147 people that can fit in the auditorium, and we have people in the gym or elsewhere in the high school, it's going to be extremely important, because we won't be waiting for vote tallies to come from other rooms and adding them up and figuring out the 2/3 vote on some articles. So that's kind of the long and short of it. There will be a help desk. The people from Option Technologies who handle the electronic voting have a lot of experience doing this. They'll be there to assist us, and hopefully it will make the meeting go more quickly and smoother than it has in the past.
One last question for Sarah that a lot of people are asking about is, why can't we use it to vote from our homes, this electronic system?
Unfortunately, the technology is not quite there yet on an open town meeting for us to be voting from home. If we had a representative form of town meeting, as other towns do, I understand that there have been a couple of towns, at least one town, that has done a representative town meeting via Zoom. At the moment, however, we have to know that the people voting are the actual voters. If we gave people, we don't currently have the technology to make sure that the person voting is the actual voter.
Libby, another question. Besides town meeting, there is a separate municipal election coming up on June 16th. What effect does its outcome have on annual town meeting?
Normally, the election has been after town meeting. And it's a little bit backwards this year, as many things are. At the select board meeting this past week on May 27th, the board endorsed the idea of not taking up the warrant articles that were subject to ballot questions. So we do have several warrant articles that are contingent upon the passage of ballot votes. So even if those ballot votes pass, and they are a mix of debt exclusions and capital exclusions and one operating override, they will not be taken up at town meeting. And again, this is an effort to reduce the number of controversial articles that could come up at town meeting, and any one of those articles that are contingent upon the ballot question could be controversial. So those are going to be recommended to be tabled or passed over. So that's the impact that will have on town meeting.
Now, Libby, for the benefit of our fellow procrastinators, how late can they arrange to vote in the municipal election by mail, and how would they do so?
Okay, there's information online about this on the town website under the elections link, and the town clerk has put on 4 simple steps for mailing in your ballot for the election. We are really trying to encourage people to do that rather than attend the election on June 16th. You need to obtain the municipal early voting application, and that is available online. There's a link in the 4 easy steps. If you don't have access to a printer, you can certainly call the town clerk's office and they can instruct you, but you could also submit a handwritten note requesting a ballot with your signature, voting address, and address to where you mail the ballot. And you can also drop that off at a drop box that's right outside the front door of the town hall at 16 Broad Street. You then fill it out and mail it back, or put it back in the drop box. The early voting deadline is Friday, June 12th at 4 o'clock. Absentee voting deadline is Monday, June 15th at noon. And the town clerk recommends applying for either one of those applications, the absentee or the mail-in, a week in advance due to uncertainty of mail delivery sometimes. The ballots must be received back by the close of the day on the day of the election, close of the polls on the day of the election, which is, again, June 16th. There's also a video online. Town Clerk Nancy Holmes explains this. The link to that video is contained in the description of this video.
Now, Libby, what can you tell out-of-state visitors who are planning to come to Nantucket?
In general, people coming from out of state to Nantucket this summer should be prepared for some differences than you might have seen before. We have a mask order, a face covering order in effect. So if you cannot social distance, you must wear that when you're outside or in a public area. You must social distance. You must stay home if you are feeling sick or if you are sick. We are really emphasizing people to take personal responsibility for hygiene, face coverings, social distancing. You will find that restaurants are not open for indoor dining. They are, for the most part, all open for curbside delivery, takeout. There are some other retail shops open for curbside delivery only, and some other businesses are open in a very limited way. So those items are probably not totally new to you wherever you are right now, but you will definitely see that here. Something that's caused a little confusion for people coming out of state is whether or not they need to self-quarantine for 14 days. There is a state of Massachusetts advisory that if you are coming from out of state into Massachusetts, you are urged to quarantine for 14 days, self-quarantine for 14 days. So it's an advisory, do your best, and really just wash your hands a lot, wear that face covering, social distance, don't go to parties, don't sponsor parties, host parties. We really need to count on people's personal responsibility this summer. Otherwise, we don't want to experience an outbreak. An outbreak or a surge in cases could mean more restrictions being implemented, and nobody wants to see that. So please take personal responsibility. As far as town meeting goes, for people, non-voters who might want to attend, we are not permitting non-voters to attend town meeting this year for safety reasons. We will allow one representative from our established advisory committee of non-voting taxpayers if they wish to attend, but this is meant just for voters. They can certainly watch it on NCTV.
I just wanted to add my advice to people coming from off islands, or actually people already being on island. First of all, I'm looking forward to seeing more people around at an appropriate social distance. I've had some of the most amazing takeout food from the Nantucket restaurants that I've ever had. I think we're extremely lucky to live where we are, where we have gourmet takeout. But when you're out and about, my advice is to act as though you have the virus, and to act as though every person you come into contact with also has the virus.
We will continue to provide you with updates on the coronavirus and impacts for Nantucket. Please tune in to Nantucket Pulse, a wellness segment series with new episodes each week. Hosted by Natalie Seminaro, it's designed to connect our viewers with local health professionals that can help us take care of ourselves and others around us. You can watch on Channel 18 and nctv18.org. Please share this with friends and family. It's important that communications remain in place as events continue to unfold and we all remain connected. It's crucial to get the facts from your local news sources such as the Inquirer and Mirror, 97.7 AC-FM radio, and NCTV Channel 18. Please stay tuned to see a special message from our essential workers from the community.